ICQ Podcast, episode 345, Progressive Changes at the ARRL. Hello, fellow amateur and radio enthusiasts, and welcome to our 345th episode of the ICQ Amateur and Radio Podcast, supported this episode by Tony Hickson, Mike 5, Oscar Tango Alpha, Mark Fairchild, 2E0, Mike Foxtrot Zulu, and Richard Dalton, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin, MNMRB, is joined by Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie India Bravo, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin, M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief. And this episode's feature is an interview conducted by our colleague Frank Howell, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, with ARRL CEO David Minster, November Alpha 2 Alpha Alpha, and the President, Roderick K5UR Uniform Romeo, as they discuss changes with the ARRL. As always, we'd like to thank our donors here on the ICQ podcast for helping keep the show advert free. And this episode, we'd like to thank Tony Hickson, Mike 5, Oscar Tango Alpha, for his one-off donation. Tony just sends a simple message saying thanks for a great show. I look forward to it coming out every couple of weeks. So thanks a lot for your support, Tony. We'd also like to thank Richard Dalton, who set up a subscription donation, along with Mark Fairchild, 2E0, Mike Foxtrot Zulu, who says, just a quick message, enjoying the podcast, I'm worth every penny to keep up the good work. So thanks, Mark, for showing your value in the ICQ podcast. As always, it's very simple to help us out. All you need to do is think of the value you got from the show and put that into a financial monetary term, and then visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate and say everything you send our way keeps us advert free, pays our costs for us, and say is a way of you helping us out and keeping the show running. Right, now we're going to head off to the news round table now, where we're going to join Martin, Leslie, Dan and Edmund to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including Automation App Wins Award and radio hams tackle RF pollution. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
As part of the ICQ podcast support of amateur ham radio hobby, we are pleased to announce we have a Brandmeisters DMR talk group. This group is intended to be used to allow us all to communicate around the world and help each other as an Elmering talk group. Several of the ICQ podcast presenters will be monitoring this talk group at various times of the day, and we look forward to your comments and feedback. For those of you who don't own a DMR radio and would like to take part, there is a mobile phone app called DroidStar. For Brandmeisters, you will need to set up an account and password direct with Brandmeisters. For those of you who want to connect via RF but don't have a DMR radio, other digital modes such as Yaesu, Fusion, D-Star, P25 and NXDN will be connected to TG9 480 in the next few weeks. Our thanks to Adrian Craig M0GLJ and Andrew Taylor MW0MWZ for helping make an idea come to life. Our talk group is 9480. To ensure you are kept up to date with the latest developments happening on the ICQ podcast, please visit our website and sign up for our newsletter. We all look forward to working you on this talk group as soon as possible.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode's ICQ podcast, episode 345. And today I'm joined by Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
Good evening, Martin. Did you say 345, Martin? No, never.
Certainly is, Leslie. Certainly is. Yeah.
Good evening.
Yeah. I've also got the other side of the pond, Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hi, guys.
Yeah. I think Leslie's forgot how many episodes we've done, Dan, but yeah, it's getting there. Moving back to the UK, we have Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, you can try and keep us under control, are you?
If I must.
I think you might have to. Okay. This is the nearest round table for this episode, and the four of us are going to bring you some interesting news stories that we'll hopefully be able to discuss. This one Dan sent me, which I thought was really, really good, and I almost missed this one. If Dan hadn't said it, I would have done. Concord student wins Congressional app challenge. Now, I think anything the youngsters do in our hobby is great. So, Dan, would you like to go first on this one?
Sure. So this, I was going to say kid, but of course that's not really the right word. The young amateur won what is called the Congressional App Challenge, and this is the first time I've heard of this. And apparently, it's a challenge to get kids more involved in STEM topics. This particularly one being software development. And Sean Donnellan, trying to remember his call sign, can't really forget his call sign, but he created this app called NetHam, the Public Service Event Coordinator's Third Hand. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to find out much more about it, but apparently it's designed to help coordinators of public service events do their job more properly. You know, who's available for service, where they're operating, that kind of thing. So I think this is a very cool thing. I think maybe more emergency communications and public service people ought to look into this and see if they can use it.
Yeah, certainly, because, I wouldn't have thought of a young ham, doing an app for this sort of part of our hobby. But that's only ignorance on my part. I mean, he must be quite involved in this side of the hobby, I would suggest. And it's a shame, as you say, we couldn't find out a terrible lot about him. But that's mainly, I suppose, because being a youngster, you don't want to publish too much about the individual up on the web there. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Right, that's what I was guessing.
Okay. Well, I was just looking at that, and STEM, I thought we ought to sort of say that STEM stands for Science, Technological, Engineering and Mathematics. So that's sort of the breadth of the what he's looking at. I think it's absolutely excellent. I think apps are the way to go. You can make things very, very quickly, and people can have prototypes, things ready, easy to use very, very quickly indeed. And I've had direct experience of somebody doing that for me as well. On another subject, I think the other thing with getting youngsters in as well is not only does it bring them to the hobby, but because they're a fresh mind, they may look at things slightly differently that we didn't think of. And there's always that nugget of that just one nugget, and you think, yeah, we're going to go with that one, and that's our business. That's our Facebook and social media and all these things started off. They were just college projects, if you like. So good on him. Well done, and carry on.
Yeah, I think this is good. And the other thing is, and I won't hark back to too much of it, but sometimes you start something being a little bit green and not fully understanding every item that you have to go through to achieve what you need to achieve. But sometimes that naivety pulls you through when, if you had a lot more knowledge, you go, oh, that can't be done. That's impossible. Nobody will help me with that. Nobody will like this. So, people that think outside the box are great. Edmund, what do you think?
Many congratulations to Sean Donnellan on his success with his app NetHam. Like the other people on the podcast, I had a cursory look around the internet to try and find out a bit more about it, and I didn't come up with very much, but I look forward to seeing this app in action. And I think the point Leslie made about having young, fresh pairs of eyes that aren't bogged down by preconceived ideas about what is and isn't possible is a very good point. So well done, Sean, and now you're on the way up. Nothing will stop you, and I look forward to seeing this software release and any future apps that I'm sure that Sean will go on to write. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, so I think in fairness, Sean, you've done a great job. Yeah, keep up the good work. Enjoy the hobby. It's the only thing I'd say to you. And we'll look forward to more from you in the future. Okay, the ARRL rejects additional VECs. Now, I do wonder about
What's a VEC, Martin?
it's a volunteer examiner coordinator.
Oh, thank you.
They're coordinators, but Dan knows more about this than me, although I have taken the US exams. But Dan, do you want to go first again?
Sure. So this response was actually this statement was actually a response to the FCC's request for comments about having additional VECs. And to me, that was kind of a bolt out of the blue, the FCC statement. I've never heard of anybody going without testing. Testing seems pretty widely available, even in these days of pandemic. Yeah, but the FCC put out a public docket saying, we think maybe we want to have more VECs. What do you all think? And then the ARRL just published this statement saying, well, no, we have enough, And there's lots of issues here. So one of them is there's currently 14 VECs in the U.S., and you would be hard-pressed to name more than a handful of them. And the reason is a lot of those VECs are fairly inactive. So one comment about this is, well, we don't need more VECs, we just need more active VECs. So maybe the thing to do would be to hand the VEC baton over to some other group that might be more active. The other point about this, I've reported on this on my blog, and some of the comments said, well, of course the ARRL doesn't want more VECs because that'll eat into this revenue stream for them. They said, well, we can't imagine that it costs them actually $15 each to process these, so they must be making a buck off it. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, organizations have costs and all that, but that's another sort of idea here, is that having more VECs will cut into the ARRL revenue stream. So you got all these things floating around. My opinion is I don't really think we need more VECs either, just because I've never heard of anybody, certainly none of my students, have ever not been able to get a test in a reasonable amount of time. So I don't know. In a way, it's kind of a non-issue, but it's kind of an interesting. It raises a bunch of interesting issues. That's what I'll say about it.
Yeah, but if I agree with you, if you've got a bunch of VECs that are inactive, then maybe it's time to clear them out and get some more in. I think, that competition is reasonably good, and it may very well help by getting some more in, that you can think of new ways to do exams and new methods of training and a whole sort of thing.
Well, right. So I would agree with you on that. Some of these in more or less in ABC, they'll hear us here and take the hint and say, hey, let someone else do this instead of us. We're not really interested, and that's a fine thing too. If they're not really interested in doing it anymore, then that's fine. I mean, people's interests change and people come and go. So if they're truly not active now and they really don't see that they'll be active in the future, pass the baton on to someone else.
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit like websites, isn't it? Things like that and I'm using a website as an example. Yeah, if somebody wrote a website in 2003 and hasn't updated it since, then that website information is a long way out of date. Now, it could be it's the basic material, but a lot of the new stuff would never be covered on it. So, yeah, you've got to have active people. Edmund, what do you think?
I don't think there's anything useful I can really add or say to this, to be honest, Martin. Sorry.
Have I been on too long then?
No, it's just I can't think of anything to say.
All right, no probs. Okay, Leslie, you got any thoughts on this one?
I have actually. And it's been a long day at work for me as well. So, I mean, look, yeah, I agree. There's a thing called the Pareto Rule, and some people aren't aware of it, but it's And I've seen this. It's used in so many walks of life. It's 80% of the 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. And you get some people come in, they're very enthusiastic, and they do a good job for a couple of years, and then it sort of dwindles off, and naturally, or they could move on to other things. And I think sometimes sometimes the baton has got to be, shall we say, passed on to other people, and that's a good thing. Even myself, I'm a treasurer of a local club, and if somebody else wanted to run it, I'll go, well, there you are, I'll hand it over, and then I'll go and have a pint in the corner. I must admit, I'm a member of the ARRL, so I'm sort of reading this story, and I'm getting what has been said on about this, and I'm just looking at it with interest. But I do think changes are inevitable sometimes. But it is unusual to turn good volunteers away, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. It's interesting, but there you go. Well, there's a lot of ARRL stories today, and the ARRL are considering covering young members' licence fees. Now, that's the first immediate statement. I've discussed this with Dan a good few times, but that's not strictly true when you read the whole thing. And I'm going to get Leslie to go first, because you have thoughts on this one as well, don't you?
Yes, Martin. I've got mixed feelings about it, to be honest, because I'm all for encouraging youngsters and new people into the hobby. Great, and I'm for that. And I do know one story about a well-known emporium in the UK, which there was a discussion between that person and the owner of the shop, and a youngster got a call up, and he was presented with a nice shiny new radio. And my thoughts on that was excellent. It can't happen very often, mind, but and that's good. Support and helping out is fine. What I'm uncomfortable with is ongoing subsidies, and that's always a problem, because organisations can afford it when the sun shines, but when it starts to rain and they've given subsidies to this group of people and subsidies to that group of people, and you think, we can no longer do this anymore. And I've been in that situation, and it's very, very uncomfortable. And you're made to look like the villain of the piece, when actually all you're trying to do is just balance the books. So yes, I'm all for encouraging people, and I think that's good. But I'm not personally, my own view is I'm not keen on subsidy. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, but Dan, I'll bring you in now on this one. The headlines, if you just read the headline, you think that the ARRL are considering paying the licence fee for these people. But that ain't strictly correct from when you start reading the rest of the story, is it, Dan?
Well, so that's correct. So the rules for eligibility include membership in an ARRL-affiliated 501c3 charitable organization, and they must have had their tests through an ARRL VEC-sponsored exam session. So while, like, our local club is an ARRL-affiliated club, so if some youngster belonged to our club, they would qualify for that as long as they took the test through an ARRL VEC, which our volunteer examiners are currently. But so and we don't charge any dues for kids, so they wouldn't have any expense there, but they would have to pay the $15 test fee. So right off the bat, the ARRL is getting back about, not quite half the amount. So it's not a total subsidy of or a total covering of the $35. Not only that, I mean, the way Leslie put it too, that it would be a continuing thing, and I don't see this as being a continuing thing. Say someone got his license or her license when they were 12 years old. Well, by the time they came up for renewal, they'd be 22 years old and presumably not eligible to receive new payment. So, it's really kind of a one-time thing, and there's some limitations on it. So
I'm fine on one-time things. One-time things are good.
Yeah, so I think that's the case here. It's just getting them started and getting them going.
Yeah, but the other thing, Dan, is that also they've said they're not going to give it to everybody. There's only a limited number, wasn't it? So.
All right. So that's another point. They said there's a limited number. And of course, there's a lot of this that's still up in the air because this was just a proposal at the latest board meeting. But I wouldn't. I would be in favor of this. Let's put it that way.
I would be in favor of it, but the details would have to be hammered out.
Right.
And that's the important thing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree if somebody really is in need of assistance, you'd help them. Come on, I'm not that cold-hearted. But I often look at things and think there is a cost to doing everything. There's a cost to going to the cinema. There's a cost if you play football. You obviously got your boots and your kit. There's, whatever you do in life, there's some cost. And, when somebody's pleading poverty and they got like £150 trainers on and, the latest gear and the latest iPhone, okay, it's your own choice what you spend your money on. I'm not going to knock you for spending on your iPhone and your super duper trainers, but equally, if you choose to do that, why should I choose to buy you a license?
Martin, if you look at this country, I mean, the subject you brought up was football. The price people pay for their season tickets and their kit, and they can easily go to a football match, go just to watch a football match, go through about £150 a day. And it's I was shocked when I found that out. And I was like, wow, my hobby looks cheap by comparison.
I tell you what, when Colin's over, Colin supports his favourite football team. I'm not that interested in football, but I sometimes go with Colin. And I get a concession ticket because I'm over 65. And it's still 20 quid to get in to watch a group of donkeys kick a bag of wind around for 90 minutes. I'm sorry, but they ain't even a top-class team. So,
Oh dear.
Sorry. But anyway.
Well, we're going to hear from the sports fans in the audience on this one.
Oh, we probably are. But it's what it's worth.
I'll stick with my radio. That's fine. I buy bits now and again, and that's probably about it. I've got all the stuff I need. It's just bits and pieces now.
So Edmund, we must have left you something on this one.
Well, I'm paraphrasing what I've said in previous editions here, I think, but I agree with the point you make there, Martin. If you genuinely can't afford $35, then how on earth are you going to make your way in the ham radio hobby? Unless you happen to live a couple of miles down the road from a very active 2 meter 70 centimeter repeater, and your only amateur radio gear is going to be a cheap Chinese handheld, for example. If you can't afford $35 for the exam fee, then I think you really are going to struggle in the hobby overall. I hear what Leslie's saying about, subsidising things is okay when the sun shines, but the day will always come when the sun doesn't shine. I actually think the take-up of this is going to be, it was likely to be very minimal, particularly if the ARRL requested evidence of inability to pay rather than just taking people's words for it, because anybody could say $35 is money I can't afford, I'd like a subsidy please. The act of saying that neither proves nor guarantees that it's true. So if the ARRL operated some due diligence and auditing and requested, for example, bank statements so they could monitor or look at income versus expenditure and available cash flow, then I suspect the number of people who would actually be prepared to provide that evidence to support their claim of hardship would be vanishingly small, to the point that the good publicity that the ARRL would get for making this offer would far outstrip the financial cost. So the ARRL could have a win on their hands in that respect as well. But beyond that, Martin, I agree with what Dan and Leslie, even if I can say his name properly, have already said. Back to you, Martin.
Well, it sounds like I got a cold heart on this one, but in fairness, yeah, I'll help people. I've been known to give radios away. I've been known to do all sorts of things.
We do that, Martin. It's just part and parcel of,
Yeah, we do that as part of the hobby. Yeah, and it has to be done on an individual basis. But yeah, you've got me off on one of my soapboxes on this. Right, let's go. Let's leave the States at the moment for our news stories. Pop over to Germany, where Ed Durant will be most upset because he isn't on the podcast while I'm talking about a German news story. But the German radio hams are tracking RF noise pollution. It turns out the DRC reports another 35 electrical noise area monitor systems are going in place. So phenomenal amount of work going on this one. Edmund, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, again, I can't really think of anything to say about it beyond what I said last time when this subject came up, which is if Germany can do it, why can't we?
Yeah, well, these are extra ones because originally they put some in, they put another 35 in.
Yeah, and it's probably a very difficult task they're facing because, to give you an example, here I live in a semi-rural area, and depending on the time of day and the day of the week, the noise that I have on 40 metres can be anywhere between about S1 and S7, S8. So I'm convinced that a lot of the time it's not just one device that is causing this noise, it's multiple devices all around me in the neighbours' houses, possibly even in my house. I've no idea what equipment my stepson has ordered off eBay and might be using in his room unbeknown to me. So it's not like there's one source that you go after in one given area and you can DF that and pinpoint it down. In any given spot, there's probably like a soup of several devices making noise all mixed together. So I'm glad they've increased their capability still further in Germany, but I've got a feeling they're going to need it, Martin.
Yeah, I've got a feeling they will because there is a tremendous amount of background noise at the moment with all the electronics we're getting. Leslie, your thoughts?
Yeah, Dan, thanks very much for that information. It reminds me of some issues that we've had here recently with Ofcom and the RSGB. And there was some complaints about a particular issue, and Ofcom said there was 3 complaints, and the RSGB said, well, no, that's actually 6 complaints. And there was lots and lots of radio amateurs complaining. Yes, the noise did exist, and yes, there was interference, but there wasn't actually very many people putting proper written complaints into Ofcom. So it was all anecdotal, which counts for nothing. What this system does by the DRARC, and I must admit I did misread it earlier, what it does is actually provide proper, objective scientific data, which is very, very important. If you're going to present stuff to governments, government bodies, it's got to be proper scientific data, and I think this is an excellent move. The other thing I'd like to say as well is that within EMC issues, it's very, very difficult for people to actually, to visualize what these problems can occur. And if we try and explain it, and we sort of get blank looks, and if we say, well, it's going to interfere with aircraft or the local ambulance service, and we know about that, and so, but yeah, I think it's a very, very good move indeed, and like I said, it gives the authorities the proper information on which they can act.
Yeah, well, on this on interference problem, I mean, since just before Christmas, we've been down to a one-car family, and I've been driving Mrs. B's car. And every time I used to drive Mrs. B's car, the 2 meter calling frequency in the UK of 145.5 megs used to have a horrible noise on it. And I found it was her car phone charger that she used to leave plugged in. Now, ever since I've been driving it, it's been unplugged, and it's gradually made its way to the boot or trunk in the States. And for very much longer, it's going to get filed under B1N because it's a damn nuisance. but yeah, there you go. Dan, sorry, I'm being naughty. Round to you.
No problem. Well, I think we may have missed. This isn't actually a government program. This is a program being undertaken by the DARC. So it's the hams themselves that are actually doing this. And I think this is fantastic. I would suggest that I'm going to suggest to somebody in the ARRL that they look at this and try and do something like that here. Talking about generating documentation. If we got, here in my city, for example, if I got 5 or 6 people to put in these stations, all generating some kind of information. I don't know exactly what, but that's supposedly part of this effort, is to figure out what kind of information is needed, then how to go about getting it. I think this is a wonderful thing.
Well, it certainly is, and it's. I mean, the more information we have on interference and one thing or other, the better it all becomes. I mean, last episode we talked about power line interference and being able to find sporadic E with it, the noise from it. So I think it's a good thing, A, to try and cut down and kill off the background noise and the interference, but B, if we understand it a bit more, maybe we can do like the other guys did and use it to our advantage.
And because these systems are all, I would guess, built similarly, they'll all generate similar data. So you have fewer correspondence problems, right?
Yeah, and if they're lucky, we might even get Frank to analyze it for them. Hi. Sorry, Frank, I've stitched you up here.
So this I like this a lot. I think this is really quite a good program.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's well worth doing. So great the DRC are doing this. DARC rather are doing this. Good on them. And let's see what comes out of it. Moving to our last news story. I kind of like this one. I always like to try and finish on a feel-good story. And Tommy Knight, G2FUU. The clue is G2. It's an old call sign. He's now celebrating his 100th birthday. And we have a picture of him on our notes in front with his birthday card from the Queen. Edmund, what do you think?
Well, very many happy returns to this gentleman who's a member of a quite select club, because I can't imagine there are that many G2 plus 3-letter call signs in circulation these days where the holder is the original holder. Okay, there may be some people out there who hold G2 plus 3 letters where the call sign belonged to their late father, for example. But for the person to be the original holder and still going, that's really, really good. So many congratulations. And as we all know, amateur radio and the associated topics are very good for keeping you in your youth mentally, if indeed not physically.
They certainly are. So, Dan, in fairness, you've had quite a few your side of the pond who've made it to 100 and 100 plus. But this gentleman looks a quite happy gentleman, and he's a member of the Rotarians as well, like you are.
Yeah, I noticed that he's a member of the group called Rotarians on Amateur Radio, or ROAR, and I'm also a member of that group. So happy birthday, Tommy! That's pretty cool.
That's a good one. Leslie, final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, but happy birthday, Tommy! I see that he's got his postcard from the Queen, which pleased me immensely, and there's also a comment about his experience in the RAF. Fitting radar to Spitfires. And I'm glad to hear he's still very active on the air when he's able to, especially as part of the Rotarians over Amateur Radio Net. So happy birthday, Tommy, and all the very best from London.
Yeah, and what's more, Tommy, all the very best from all of us at the ICQ podcast. I'm sure the others would be just as pleased as we are that it's your birthday. Right, that concludes our news stories. Let's find out what everybody's been up to since the last time we were here. So let's start. Leslie, what have you been up to?
Well, apart from the joys of work, which I'm not going to go into on this one, just playing about with some new tech, a few bits and pieces I've got to add on to my PC when I'm giving talks and stuff like that. So there's one coming up in the future that people might like to have a look at. But why is it? Last Friday I did one, and my PC decided to automatically update, and it crashed just as I was doing something important. And I don't know if it's got this innate, it knows I'm got to do something important, because it just went nuts. And it took me 6 hours to try and fix it. So I wasn't too pleased about that. But apart from that computer kerfuffle, and we've got stuff on the local UHF UHF net on OY, which is the local repeater here. So that's still going strong. And that's about all. That's about everything from here, Martin.
Yeah. Well, that bird of advice, I always do updates on my computers before I go to a meeting. But it's hindsight, Leslie, and you can turn the updates off so that they won't do them for, or that you set them so they'll only happen at a certain time of day, so that doesn't crash while you're trying to do something, because there's nothing more annoying when it does it.
Annoying. I mean, if there was a scale, annoying being 1 and a volcanic eruption, I think I went off 10. But never mind. It happens occasionally.
It certainly does. So there you go. Dan, what have you been up to?
Well, so I'm now in my middle of, or almost at the end of, the 6th online tech class that I've taught. The reason I had quite a good turnout for this class. I had more than 45 people sign up for this class. And I've lost a few of them, unfortunately. But Thursday, tomorrow night, we're having the last class and should have 40 or more new hams by the weekend.
So you single-handedly boosted the state's hams like the guys over here are doing. And as I say, I believe what you're doing, you do it over Zoom, if I remember right, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, Zoom.
And it's quite a useful little tool for that. So that's good news. And say six complete classes, this year is a lot of work.
Plus a general.
That's
Plus
7.
a general.
All right. So good news. And as I say, I'm sure your students are really appreciative of that. So, yeah. Right, Edmund, what have you been up to?
Well, for my second appearance in a row, I'm afraid the answer is not very much. Maybe I've just been very unlucky in terms of when I've turned the radios on, but conditions don't seem to have been particularly good recently. There were predictions of good conditions on VHF and UHF midweek, just gone, but despite going down to the beach, I didn't manage to talk to anybody on the North French coast. So that means we're almost in March 2021 and we haven't had any good tropospheric ducting here on the south coast, well, specifically where I am on the south coast anyway, since November 2020. So some good conditions are well overdue there. On HF, after the really good start we had at the beginning of 2021 when the sunspot numbers and the solar flux index went up, that seems to have been a bit of a false dawn, sadly. And every time I've turned the radio on, conditions haven't been particularly good on 40 metres and the higher bands as well. I'm still using the club call sign from Amberley Museum from home. That's Golf X-Ray 3 Whiskey Mike uniform. But I've because of how conditions have been, when I've turned the radio on, I've tended to go into search and pounce mode, tune the band's listening for people calling CQ and responding to them rather than me calling CQ myself, because I seem to get a better hit rate that way when conditions are bad. So not done much transmitting, done a fair bit of listening on the amateur bands CB, PMR 446, VHF Marine and things like that. I've also been watching YouTube videos quite a lot, and if I come across an interesting one, I'll always post a link into the ICQ Podcast Facebook group in case other people find it interesting. One channel I've been watching in particular belongs to Lewis, Mike 3 Hotel Yankee, up there in Manchester. That's the Ringway Manchester channel. And in recent weeks, Lewis has been releasing, I suppose they're almost like mini documentaries. Most of them are well under 10 minutes, and many of them cover amateur radio. Many of them don't, but are interesting nevertheless. For example, he's released videos recently on various license-free systems that exist all over the world. And I've certainly learned a lot of stuff watching his videos. They're very well researched, very informative, and he's clearly been meticulous and put an awful lot of time into making those videos. So if you want a bit of entertainment on YouTube when conditions are bad on the band, you could do a lot worse than having a look at the Ringway Manchester channel on YouTube. So that's what I've been doing. I've been sitting in front of my laptop for far too long, Martin, but I still have yet to make my first contact using FT8. How about that?
Well, we got to do it sometime, mate. Got to do it sometime. Well, I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Right, what have I been up to? Well, based on the announcement you heard at the beginning of the podcast, I've been working on a ICQ digital voice project. Been working with a guy called Adrian Craig, M0GLJ, and we've done some work with Andy Taylor, MW0MWZ, who's the Brandmeisters Administrator in the UK. And ICQ Podcast now has a talk group on Brandmeisters, talk group 9480. And if you spoke to me 3 weeks ago, I was told I got more chance of winning the lottery than getting a talk group. It's live, boys, and more is coming fairly very shortly. What I will say is if you're having problems connecting to Brandmeisters or you're having problems with your radio, can't say we can fix every problem, but if you drop us an email to info@icqpodcast.com, that's info@icqpodcast.com, we'll try and sort any problems out for you. But I will say, talk group 9480 has been fairly active throughout the day. There's a gentleman, Phil, comes on from Australia, VK6 ADF. Ed's on from Germany quite regularly. To the rest, Martin Rothwell, myself, Chris Howard, Adrian, and a number of other people. And if I forgot to mention people's names, I apologise. Had a nice chat with a guy in the States and another nice guy in Poland over the weekend. But don't just blip it and say nothing, because at the moment, as more and more people find out about this group, there will be more and more people for you to talk to. As I say, it's a slow uptake. But once we've got this all bedded in, we will be implementing some other new modes as well, which will make it even more interesting. So that's what I've been up to. So as I said, done a lot on DMR over the last 2 weeks. Been fairly active on Fusion as well. And I actually last Saturday got round to programming my my ICOM 208E, which is in Carol's car. It's all bolted in properly, and it didn't have the local repeater where I work on, and there's a lot of activity goes on that when I'm driving to and from work. So ever since the middle of December, it's been either too cold or too wet to get out and do it. But yeah, I was out there on Saturday reprogramming radio, so that's working. And lastly, Edmund, you mentioned FT8. I tried. I really did try. I managed to get the FT8 software up, and I managed to get it all connected to my ICOM 703. And I think my problem is, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but I don't know what the duty cycle is on FT8. So I didn't go full power, which is 10 watts. I put it down to 5 watts, and then went in and tried to configure the software, and I just couldn't get it to go into transmit. And one of the options in FT8 is, do you come off the back data socket or do you go off the front microphone socket? Well, my radio's got a back data socket, so I was hoping to do that, but it was greyed out, and those two options were greyed out with the button saying front mic socket. So I thought that was the problem and spent ages trying to work out how I could get it to talk to the radio properly. What it turned out to be, to get it to transmit, is I had to turn the power up. There's a power slider in the software, and I had to turn it almost to the top to get my radio to go into transmit. So, just if you're playing with FT8, it's the software maybe doesn't do quite what you want. And maybe I'm just being ignorant because I haven't done it before or on my own. But I did get it transmitting. I didn't get anybody coming back to me because I was only putting out 5 watts. Probably need to put out a bit more than that. But I'm kind of a little bit worried about running it to full power on a duty cycle on a digital mode. So that's what I've been up to. So I don't know if Dan, if you've had any experience with FT8.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about the power output. I think the duty, there's no problem with the duty cycle. And I guess one thing I'd suggest is get a Flex 6400 like mine. There's no it's all digital inside the computer, so it works like a charm.
Yeah, the only reason I was using my 703 was it was in the box, so I just packed it, took it to work. I've got it.
Yeah, I'm just kidding, but that should work. That should work just fine. And of course, with a 7300, if you had a 7300, everything would be digital over the USB cable. That when I had a 7300, that worked pretty well too.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. I've got a very early signal link that didn't go to USB, so it came out with sound out and sound in. So I've got to take that into a USB sound card to put it into the radio, into the computer. It works. It works perfectly okay. My homemade cat cable works perfectly okay to, when you move frequencies, it chunks over. And I've only got 2 USB ports on my computer, so I've got a Bluetooth mouse. It all worked. I didn't get any contacts, but then I'm working late next week, so it'll be another chance to have a go at that one. So, I'll see. I'll let you know what happens.
The other thing you have to really be careful of is time synchronization.
Yeah. I've got the time sync software on my my computer, so it says it time syncs. So so we'll see. I'm thinking I really ought to give it a try because I know just about everybody's doing it. I really ought to have a look at it. It doesn't really float my boat, but I'm sure a lot of things I do don't float other people's boats, but I'd like to give it at least a fair try. So there you go. So that's what we've been up to, guys. So all that's left for me to do is thank the boys for joining me tonight before we move on to the next part of the podcast. So I'd like to say 73s to Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin. It's been fun as always.
No problems. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU.
73 Martin, Ed, and Leslie.
Yeah, 73. And I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
Cheerio, everyone, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, 73 all, and we'll continue with the rest of the podcast.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com
ICQ.org/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. Firstly, very grateful for Tim Beaumont, Mike Zero, Uniform Romeo X-Ray, for popping a news story across our way. And it's to promote the 100th year centenary of the Royal Australian Air Force. Now, the Royal Australian Air Force started in 1921, and over obviously the last 100 years has grown to be a potent world-class air force, which Australia relies on, both in conflict and in peace. To mark this centenary, there are two special event stations being arranged. VK100AF, which will run from the 1st of March till the end of August, which will be used by a team of radio amateurs across the bands in Australia. And for a shorter period of time, VI100AF will run from the 1st of March till the 29th of May, and it'll be used by radio amateurs that are either current or veteran military personnel, and there'll be some activities from military bases. So say there's lots of information there. We've got lots of links as well to how you can find more information about say the different call signs. QSLs are available as well, QSL cards, so you'll be able to get a nice commemorative marking of working one of these wonderful special event stations. So thank you, Tim, for popping it our way. Joseph Donnell, November Echo 3 Romeo, has done something similar. He's let us know about the Light Up 2 Meters night, which is going to be taking place on the 25th of April. It's going to be taking place between 6 and 8 p.m. Local time. So I say there is a basically 2 meter FM simplex frequency going to be issued. And say, of course, all bands and modes available, and say common to get involved on this event. So say no matter if you're operating from a fixed, mobile or portable method, they'd love to have you join in and help them out with this special event. So we'll pop information from both those events on ICQpodcast.com webpage. And importantly as well, if you've got an event or a news story you'd like to help get publicised, you can visit the ICQ Podcast webpage and say contact us, and we'd love to help you out and get you involved. This episode's feature is an interview with David Minster, November Alpha 2 Alpha Alpha, who's the ARRL CEO. And he's announced as well he's going to be the keynote speaker at the QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo, which takes place in a fortnight's time on the 13th and 14th of March. David is one of 80 speakers in the lineup, and he'll be taking questions and presenting various topics, including the ARRL's digital transformation, their learning hub, increasing video content, and also improving the tools and training, engaging clubs, emergency communication volunteers and students. So certainly, say very well. I mean, David may be covering some of those parts that will not be in our feature, but as I certainly be interested to see him in person. You can not only get tickets to see David's talk along with the 80 others, but also come along and visit your ICQ podcast presenters just by clicking on one of the banners on the ICQ Podcast webpage, where it'll take you through to an area where you can get tickets for the show, say in a fortnight's time. I think we've got 9 ICQ Podcast presenters are going to be in and out of the show over the weekend, so hopefully you'll be able to touch base with your favourite presenter if you attend that expo that's happening online. Right, well, now we're going to move over to our features episode, where, say, we're going to be chatting with David Minster there and the ARRL President, Rick Roderick, Kilo 5 Uniform Romeo, and they're going to be chatting to Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, about the changes upcoming at the ARRL. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hello everybody. This is Frank K4FMH, Fox Mike Hotel, with another feature interview for the ICQ podcast. It's a real delight today for me to have two of the management intelligentsia of the American Radio Relay League. We have our president, Rick K5UR, Rick Roderick in Little Rock. Hello, Rick.
Oh, Frank, everyone.
Good to have you. And we have the, can't say new CEO, because he's been there and he's worn the polish off some things. According to Rick, he's been going 100 miles an hour since he arrived. David Minster into Alpha Alpha. Hello, Dave.
Hi, Frank. It's NA2AA.
NA2AA. Okay. I picked that up from the minute. So there's some wet noodles that need to go out from whoever prepared the minute. So NA2AA. Very good. And we're going to get right into it. Recently had a periodic board meeting in January. Most of our listeners have probably some idea of what it takes to prepare for a board meeting. But just in case there's anybody out there who thinks it's a matter of getting a styrofoam cup with coffee and chat about some things, Rick, tell us briefly, what's it like to prepare and have a board meeting for the American Radio Relay League?
Thanks for having us, Frank, and that's a good question to start out with. Well, the board meeting is a formal meeting. We're governed by the Connecticut statutes dealing with corporations, so we have a board meeting just like any other corporate entity, very formal, very subject to protocol under Robert's Rules of Order, things like that. It's not just to get in there and sit around a table and just everybody have a free-for-all to say what they want to say. It's structured. We have an agenda that is approved and passed by the board. We follow that to the T, and it's very formal, and it's meant to be. It should be. It's a very important meeting. To prepare for it takes an enormous amount of time. In between board meetings, we have committees that are working on different assignments and projects. We have everyone on the board assigned to some committee. That's one thing I've been pleased we've been able to do over the recent few years, is assign every board member to some committee, some more than one committee. So these committees work in between the board meetings. So when we get prepared for one of our board meetings, all the committee reports come in, all the action is centered on things that need to be done at the board meeting out of these committee meetings and reports. And so it's just not something you say, okay, we got a board meeting next week and we better get ready. You actually start getting ready for it weeks in advance. And we've had some interesting board meetings here lately because of the COVID-19 situation, and we've had to go virtual using Zoom. And we had our summer last year board meeting on Zoom, and then we had a special board meeting in the fall when we elected David to come on board, David Minster, and then we had our January board meeting just a few weeks ago, and all virtually. So that's a challenge in itself, because we've got 15 directors, we've got 15 vice directors, and we've got officers, and so it's a good group to kind of keep up with who wants to say something and when. And it's been kind of challenging, but it's really gone exceptionally well. I've been very pleased with everyone and how it's all worked out, and we've learned a lot of things, about how to handle a meeting virtually. But Frank, it's a lot of work. I don't mind saying it's a lot of people put a lot of time into it, but it's all worthwhile. Obviously, we get a lot of things done, and it's an important thing we have to do.
Well, that's one thing for our listeners to think about, is that the system, if you will, of elected people, paid people, unpaid people. In full disclosure, I'm an unpaid assistant director for the Delton Division, like I like to call it. I'm a flunky at the semi-low level. And often my director, Dave Norris, asks me for input before he goes to board meeting, wants to get his counsel of folks. So there's a lot of levels to American Radio Relay League, and I think it's good for our listeners just to realize that. And if you're across the pond, RSGB has a somewhat similar type of thing, and I'm sure others do as well. So if you're trying to contact your representatives just for a board meeting and they kind of don't respond very quickly, there's probably a really good reason. They're not just necessarily dragging their feet. They're actually doing homework where people have that. And as president, you have I'm sure, a tremendous communication flow. Like, you must feel like you're drinking from the fire hose.
Yeah, that's true, Frank. I get an enormous amount of emails. Sometimes, I guess in the past, I've gotten as many as 150 emails a day. My phone sometimes starts ringing at 8 o'clock, and the emails, it's not uncommon to have 100 email day, but that's part of it. And some of it, it doesn't take long to go through, and sometimes it takes a little longer to go through and deal with a particular matter. But in any event, that's all part of it. We've been doing it for a long time, and glad we can help members out.
Great. Look, I want to get on what were some of the major actions at the January Centenary Board of Directors meeting. As you reflect on it and you've gotten things in motion, what were some of the high points, the major things that occurred?
I know we're limited on time, so let me think of 4 or 5 things here. And of course, you can read about these on the website, and then we can kick it over to David Minster, who can go over some of the initiatives and projects that David has in mind that he reported to the board, because he's got a lot going on, and I'm really pleased with his ideas and thinking along the lines of futuristic points that we need to focus on. But one of the things you'll hear about is where we put into study with the Administration and Finance Committee an idea to pay for the $35 not yet implemented fee that the FCC will be coming out with for new amateurs taking a license exam that are less than 18 years of age. And we're looking at maybe also reducing the VEC fee down to $5 for the ARRL VEC. So we're looking at studying possible ways that we can help individuals out less than 18 years old with that increased in the application fee. And we should have something more definitive by the summer board meeting on that. That committee is studying that now. Another thing that you're likely to hear about, in fact, I've already gotten a few emails about it, is something that's not new. We've looked at it in the past, and that is opening QST up to advertising for non-amateur radio-related items. And of course, that's subject to the discretion of David Minster and staff to make sure that we're appropriate with our decision-making on what comes into QST. But the board is looking for ways that we can increase revenue. It's a very difficult market out there right now, as you know, for amateur radio and dealers. And so we're looking at ways that maybe we could expand and open up ads to not amateur related, specifically amateur related advertising items. Another thing you'll probably hear something about that's getting a lot of attention nationwide is electronic ballot, for our elections, for the section managers, for the board level positions. And you'd think that that's easy to do with the electronic age we live in, but there's a lot of protocol, a lot of procedures, a lot of things that have to be considered. And so we've got a team that's going to be studying that particular issue to see if we can try that again and to get that smoothed out. Another item that you're likely to hear something about is an interesting assignment that was brought up at the board level, and that is we've got a group that's studying, we call it an investment management group, that's taking a fresh look at how we deal with our investments. For many years, we've gone without any really kind of study, or I guess questioning about, is this the right strategy to use? We want to be certainly fiscally responsible for our investments, but we've got to wondering, have we looked at this recently? And if we haven't, and maybe we need to look at it. And so we've got a group that's going to be looking at our portfolio, looking at how we get advice and whether or not we need to use financial advisors, the structure. I mean, they're going to be looking at the entire arena of our investment situation and bringing back up to with an analysis of what they find at the summer board meeting. And that's going to be interesting because we haven't done that in many, many years. So I think that's going to be very, very important. And along those same lines, talking about in our donations and things that nature, David can possibly, he's focusing on what we call development, but we are going to be looking to hire a person into an elevated role. Years ago, folks will remember the name of Mary Holbert, and she was fantastic, K1MMH, and she was our chief development officer. And so, she retired. That's been several years ago. And so we're thinking about bringing back in some more prominent level on staff, a higher level position that deals with development, and that's on David's radar, and the board specifically was interested in David moving forward with that initiative. So those are 4 or 5 things, Frank, that I think stand out from that came out of the board meeting.
Rick, let me comment on the last one, and I think that might be the single most important decision. 10 years from now, you may look back and say that was the single most important decision from a fiscal perspective. I've been involved a bit in development with nonprofits and with universities, and I think you are right on the money to look at it, to figure out what to do and how to do it best for the American Radio Relay League. As a moderately funded nonprofit, and I use that in the scope of all nonprofits, I've studied nonprofit data throughout the country. I will tell you, I think you're spot on. As this One Life member would say, good for you. I'm delighted in being married to someone whose career was in personal finance. Most of us have a portfolio, one type or another. It may be zero in some cases, depending on things, but You can't just take it and throw it all on GameStop if you GameStop, as the recent little thing did.
Yeah.
Look, let's take this and shift gears. You've got a CEO here who is obligated to manage the team in Newington and a number of other things. David, sounds like they gave you some marching orders to get busy, and you're already moving.
Well, when I came into the job, I hadn't been in there for very long, and Rick was willing to take not only the time but the risk of getting on an airplane and coming up and spending a day with me. And our thoughts were completely in simpatico right from the get-go in terms of what the league needed. If you follow my columns in QST, I'm trying to keep members connected to sort of the main themes that are happening in Newington. And the very first column I wrote was to talk about the culture of yes. And at our executive committee meeting in the fall and even at the board meeting here in January, there was a discussion around a shift in the culture at ARRL headquarters. And really that shift is to take on the position of considering a yes for everything that's asked. Now, we may wind up at a point where we have to say no, but at least if we go into it with a positive attitude and try to make things happen for members and for the hobby, we're going to wind up in a better place. This interview is timely because I had an epiphany this week about the culture of ARRL. And the conclusion that I've reached is that I really think the Centennial took the wind out of the league. It was such a monumental undertaking to do everything surrounding the Centennial, all the activities, holding a convention in Hartford, the Second Century campaign from a development perspective. When you look broad spectrum, everyone was involved in some aspect of Centennial. And if I can use this metaphor, it's a little bit like the high school prom, right? Everybody gets all excited it's coming. You wind up picking your date, and maybe it's your girlfriend or whatever, and there's the whole build up to that day, and whose mom and dad are going to do the pre-party, and who's going to do the post-party, and are you going, now this isn't true in Arkansas, but in New Jersey, are you going to go to the beach the next day, or are you going to go to Great Adventure? What are you going to do? And you finally get to it, and you have a wonderful experience for that prom, you have a wonderful experience the next day, and then the bottom drops out and it's back to finishing studies for finals, going through graduation, getting ready to go to college, and all of that closeness, all of that warmth, all of that energy that built into that event is gone. And I kind of feel that way now as I look at the culture of the team and I look at members in terms of engagement and what they want to focus on. They're really looking for that energy. That infusion of excitement back into the league and back into the hobby. So that's really what my, if you want to call them marching orders were. It was to come in and really dial up the energy. And I've turned everything up. The listeners can't see Rick's really prestigious station sitting in the background of the Zoom call that we're on right now. But all of those dials would be turned up to max. And that's what we're doing. So at the board meeting, as a part of my CEO report, when you talk about the preparation for the board meeting, it is truly extensive. The board gets a monthly status report from me. So a lot of the things that they would see in my CEO report, there's no surprises there. And there's a really phenomenal dialogue that goes on between my office and the board members. So their support and their engagement has been really fantastic for me. But we've established a set of major projects for this year. And one of the ones, the one that you were just commenting on with regard to not just the motion for a senior development person, but we've created something called Project Radiance. And Project Radiance is a top to bottom audit and review of our development office and a look at annual gifting, a look at major gifting, and a look to changing, again, the culture of our development efforts now, which tend to be very mission-centric, and the entire discussion and development really needs to migrate to be donor-centric. So understanding what's important to that donor and essentially what kind of a legacy in the short or long term they'd like to leave. Just this week we had a very interesting experience. We had a gift from, I believe he was a non-member, but in his estate upon his passing, and he was a relatively young guy, he left a substantial amount of money to ARRL because he views us as the stewards of amateur radio. Those kinds of gifts that come out of the blue, they're a nice surprise, but we really miss having the dialogue with him. We miss hearing what's important to him. What are the things about amateur radio that he loves, and what kind of a legacy would he like to have left to the hobby. So we're really excited about Radiance and being able to take the kind of conversations that Mary had and reconnect with our members and non-members, but folks that have a genuine love and passion for amateur radio and have a discussion with us about where they'd like to see us go with that.
David, that's such a great comment. Let me say that you have tangible assets that are donated. You also have about 150,000 members who have incredible talent, unknown incredible talent. And many would do things for free for the league if simply they were engaged. I've seen a bit of an opening of that door since your arrival, quite frankly, and I can applaud and appreciate your culture of yes. An old maxim in management is few managers get fired for saying no. They might get fired by saying yes. And so that creates and permeates a culture of leadership that ultimately is not good for the organization. And so you've changed those kind of perspectives into this culture of yes. And yet it's like, if you'll pardon the metaphor, post-party depression. You had a big party of a centennial and wow, we're through with that. Man, I'm dead. What I hope people remember is that they're human beings just like them who work at ARRL. They have better days than others. And so I think by keeping that in mind, it's a good thing for the folks out there. So I can't imagine a member not being very positive about that. Let me ask about an ongoing thing. The Mints and Hope contract that has been there for a while. I think there's been some discussion about where they are in fulfilling that. And why don't you clarify for our listeners where that's at and what the league is looking at in terms of that? Because it fits in a little bit to what you're talking about.
Right. So I'll start by saying that it's very difficult to build new additions onto very old buildings. And so we have a very dated old website, and adding functionality to that website is extremely difficult. And so we undertook a project. It actually started from a requirements perspective over 5 years ago. We started to take a look at how could we replace an aging membership management system. That system essentially is in a place where it's unsupported. So we need to move to a new platform. That new platform is a product called Personify. Personify is being integrated into our website, and Personify becomes the hub basically for everything that is important to our members. So their username, their call sign, their home address, their subscription selections, things like that. But one of the important things that Personify provide is the gateway into the Lifelong Learning Center. That Lifelong Learning Center is fully developed. It's fully operational. I like to say we've built the library and now we're filling the shelves. We've got a fantastic group that is working on content, and we've actually expanded our view beyond the Lifelong Learning Center into what we call the Learning Network, which are a series of podcasts and webinars and things like that members can have access to. We've also taken a look at how do we curate our YouTube channel so that we can get members and non-members to get a better understanding of ARRL and the things that are going on. I really don't like to talk about what membership benefits are, because I think people get entirely lost in, I'll just use the expression, caring about getting a magazine for their membership. ARRL membership means so much more than that. And it has everything to do with the structure that we bring to amateur radio, the relationships that we built and that we maintain with government organizations, not the least of which is FCC. And despite all of the rhetoric that you see online about that we have some kind of a weak relationship with FCC, they came to us to build the volunteer monitoring program to help from an enforcement perspective. We have Riley, who I'm sure you know is a retired FCC enforcement officer, leading that organization. Our relationship with FCC, I think, is fantastic. And the new chairperson of FCC, as I understand it, was born and raised about 3 miles from ARRL headquarters. So her roots are in our backyard. So we're really excited about, but in any event, bringing that kind of content onto YouTube is critical to us. And then the last piece that I would say, which again is sort of an offshoot to that notion of lifelong learning, is again another column that I wrote which had to do with inclusion in our community. You know, I challenged members. I can't be at every Hamfest and every club meeting, so you guys need to show up, right? But what I have taken the first steps into is to create content, whether it's informational or training, for our blind and visually impaired community. I've had fantastic member outreach from blind members. I have a telephone call with a blind member on Monday who, believe it or not, doesn't have access or use email. So we're going to have a great conversation on Monday about what his views are in terms of what that community needs. But Mince and Hoke they're a great partner. I've met with them and shared with them what my vision for ARRL is over the next 5 years. We can't wait for Personify to go live and bring the Lifelong Learning Center bring it to life, bring it to our members. And when we go to launch it, we plan on launching it with quite a bit of fanfare. It's not going to be something that just becomes a quiet link on the website. We really love the work that we're doing in that area and want to get our members excited about it too.
Well, David, we'd certainly like to help you promote that here on the podcast, and I'm sure we'll be talking some more. And one thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown is that people with time on their hands want to learn. Even some mom and pop bookstores are encountering at-curb sales off the roof. I saw a story today about a little bookshop in Decatur, Georgia, and Atlanta. Their online sales were like 10%, and now they're about 1,600% of their total sales for last year over year. Why? People have got time in their hands. And I think you've seen this. There's been a tremendous outpouring of engagement around YouTube and related video channels. So all that fits in, even though we'll get over the pandemic, hopefully, at some point. Let me round this out with you. What's been the impact at League headquarters in running a shop and running an operation, particularly as a new guy in the CEO seat? How's the pandemic kind of made an impact on HQ?
Well, in terms of meeting the needs of members, the organization early on in the pandemic, when the governor required businesses to close, our CFO, Diane Middleton, really stepped up. I call her our COVID czar. And what she has done is she has really looked at and understood what the requirements are of the Connecticut regulations and restrictions related to COVID. We were able to move very quickly to get a very large population of our staff into a position where they could work from home. We've got other folks, as you astutely pointed out, online sales are hot. We've got 4 workers in our warehouse. They can't work from home. So we had to figure out a way to be able to extend the day into 2 shifts and have 2 people in that space rather than 4. Once I came on board, in fact, one of the things that I said to Diane was, I am really going to challenge you. I want to have a face-to-face meeting with all of my direct reports the first afternoon I'm there. And she found a big conference room nearby, and we were all able to sit pretty far apart around this aircraft carrier-sized table, but we were able to meet face-to-face and to begin to build our relationships. I've had, even though they can work from home, I've had all of my management team come in, and now they work on site. And when you've got half the organization that's still working from home, social distancing is not a difficult thing for us. But under Diane's leadership and under the leadership of our management team, they were really able to pivot from an environment where everybody shows up every day to where half the workers are off site, and the members and the board have a lot to be proud of in terms terms of how ARRL has been able to continue operating under the COVID restrictions.
I want to segue just a moment back to Rick. Rick, in your day job, what do you do for a living?
I'm an attorney to represent employers dealing with labor and employment matters. I spent half of my career out in business myself, working in operations and corporate headquarters or big corporation customer service. I think I did about everything in every department except accounting back in those days, but ventured off into practicing law when they wanted to continually move me overseas. And we were growing 2 young boys at the time, and I didn't want to leave my acreage out here in the country either. So I finally said, thanks for a wonderful corporate career, and started practicing law. And that's what I've been doing for quite a long time now, Frank. So I still do that, and ARRL work as well.
So as an attorney, you can more than appreciate David's comments about making the ARRL office compliant with Connecticut's rules and regs. And during the COVID thing, they have changed on almost weekly basis in terms of the nuances.
Right.
Why would someone like you, an otherwise reasonable guy, get in line and move up the chain and become president of the American Radio Relay League?
Well, that's a good question. There are days where I've wondered, I tell you, but no, I love amateur radio. I do. I've said before, and Frank, I think you've heard me say this all the times I've been out giving presentations, particularly back when I was a director of the Delta division, our division, Frank, is that I don't know what I would do without amateur radio. I don't. It's such an important part of my life, and I love it dearly. I'm proud that I can at least spend some time in helping the league out and in its mission to help amateur radio, and it's just a pleasure for me. It obviously is a very time-consuming effort, no doubt, and like I say, there's good days and bad days, but overall, it's very very important to me to be able to do what I do for the league, and I appreciate working with everybody, and staff up there at headquarters is absolutely fantastic, and I love talking to members and working with members wherever I go, and it's just a very rewarding hobby, and I've said it before, I'll continue to say it, I think it's the greatest hobby in the world. There's nothing like it. You can go anywhere in the world and knock on a ham's door, and you got a friend.
And you are so right on that. Guys, I don't want to take too much of your time here on Saturday. I hear there's a contest going. My friend Scott Wright, he's working at the Mayo Clinic today, but he's going to try to contest some a little afterwards. David, welcome, and we hope to make this a periodic post-board interview, and so we can get the word out. And I think our listeners certainly will be intrigued by this, because folks across the pond and elsewhere who listen to us, they look at the ARRL and what they do, and they take the lead from that in many ways. They don't like what you do, they're going to go the other direction, but at least they know what your decisions are. So I appreciate your being here, and I want to thank you once again to sit for this interview.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. Appreciate it.
So that's it for this feature episode for the ICQ podcast. This is Frank K4FMH saying, ICQ, do you?
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, many thanks there to Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, for his wonderful chat there with the ARRL. And as I say, Frank's hoping to get those interviews lined up as they going forward, so we get regular updates from the ARRL. So hopefully, guys, something of interest for you. If there's any questions or queries you would maybe like Frank to consider putting on his next interview to the guys, certainly drop us a line. Usual way of doing it, click on the Contact Us page on icqpodcast.com, and say we'll put that in for consideration for our next interview. Now, we've got QSO Expo coming up in a fortnight's time. The ICQ podcast will be there. We've got a virtual stand, and we'll also be doing one of our informative, thought-provoking, chuck a grenade in the room to get you thinking talks at the show. So make sure, you come along and attend the show. I believe as of this weekend, as we release the show, there are still early purchase tickets available. We'll say getting your early entry and cheaper entry into the QSO Expo show. So each way doing that, go along to our website. We've got some banners there. So you can click on the links there and get your ticket for the show, and you can pop along, chat to your ICQ podcast presenters at the show. I think we've got about 9 of us in attendance at the show, but more important as well, if you want to see our potential talk, is our talk or potential talk we're going to be doing there, you can certainly get involved and do that from there. So QSO Expo, I think that's the 13th and the 14th of March in a fortnight's time. Well, Dad, you've been working on the ICQ DMR talk group that we've been hearing lots about at, say, this episode. And as I say, I know that's something you've got a lot of passion for and really hope that our listeners engage with.
Yeah, certainly have, Colin. And Adrian, M0GLJ, and myself initially talked about this. And we got Andy Taylor, MW0MWZ, involved as the Brandmeisters Administrator for the UK. I wish to thank both of them for helping me get this off the ground. It's at the moment we definitely have 150% a Brandmeisters talk group, and to date, although it's been a reasonably slow take up because we haven't shouted too loud about this while we made sure that it was all working, we're well in double figures now of people joining that talk group. After this week's announcement, I'm hoping to see far, far more. Guys, though, there are a number of issues. Just don't come in, blip the talk group so your call sign comes up and then disappear. Yeah, it's a new talk group. Put calls through it. Because it's an international talk group, you definitely find I won't be on in the middle of the night in the UK. But equally, I certainly know that at least one person in Australia is on, and we've had people from all over the world in this talk group. So put the call through, and the talk group's there for you to use it, to give yourselves feedback, to elmer amongst each other, and move forward. Colin and I are potentially putting in a web page which should give you some help if you need it. With answers, and we'll try and answer as many of your questions and answers as possible. We're not going to be experts on everything because there are so many digital radios out there and so many different code plugs and one thing and another. But moving forward, just watch this space. There's a lot more going on. This is what I would actually call the ICQ Digital Voice group. So, just watch what's going on, Colin.
True. And there's always these things, guys. If we don't use it, say it will just die away. So hopefully of interest for you guys. And more important as well, if you just want to experiment with DMR, there's ways of doing it through mobile phones and applications. So Droid Star is one of the solutions of doing this. So again, we'll keep putting out more and more information so people can get involved in that group. And look, hopefully you enjoy it from there. Now, we'd like to thank our donors this episode that helped fund our way and keep our show advert free, and it was great for them to support us. So that's Tony Hickson, Mike 5, Oscar Tango Alpha, Mark Fairchild, 2E0, Mike Foxtrot Zulu, and Richard Dalton. Thank you very much, guys, for showing the value you find in the ICQ podcast by sending across your kind donations. You can do the same thing if you've found some benefit in what we do. All you need to do is visit icqpodcast.com/donate and say, think of a monetary value you found value in the show, and say sign up to either a subscription donation or a one-off donation to show your value for the show. We really do appreciate it from there. We'd like to thank Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie India Bravo, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, for taking part in the news roundtable with your dad. Thanks a lot, guys, there for taking part of us from there. Now, one of the underused resources at the ICQ podcast, we don't always promote this, is our newsletter. It's a great way of keeping in touch with what we're doing, updates on the news, etc., over the time between the shows, and also gets you early access things like the DMR group that we're working on, etc. It's a great way of us being able to keep in touch with you, outside of the fortnightly cycle of the show. Again, you can sign up for the newsletter by visiting icqpodcast.com. And we promise not to sell your name or the list to anybody. You can get involved with the newsletter from there. Right, Dad, I think that just about wraps up everything for us for this show, episode number 345. And again, we're not only will we be, working on the next show for a fortnight's time, but obviously, looking forward to seeing everybody at the QSO Expo.
Yeah, certainly am, Colin. That will be fun. It's the first time for us. It's a bit different, isn't it? We've done rallies, live rallies, which we really enjoy talking to the people there. So I'm hoping that the Expo will be quite nice, and I'm hoping we can obviously move around from the stand and chat to people on the stand and maybe chat to some of the people at some of the tables. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that, Colin.
Yeah, it'd be great, The only thing I'm worried about is if we end up doing video calls and stuff. I haven't seen a hairdresser in about 3 months, so I'm not quite sure what my hair's going to look like. But let's see how that goes from there. Right, well, let's just wrap this one up. I'm going to send you off to the kitchen to make Mrs. B a cup of tea, and hopefully chocolate biscuit time for her too.
Yeah, I'll make Mrs. B a cup of tea in a second, find her a nice chocolate biscuit, and we'll spend a few minutes together at the end of the day. But don't worry, Colin, I'm not going to be as bad as you. I have Mrs. B with a set of clippers, and my hair will be nice and neat. Hi.
Beautiful. Well, listen, guys, we'll catch up with you again in a fortnight's time. 73's all.
73.